All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Milliron. I am a solutions architect at Red Hat for JBoss middleware. And today we're going to be covering the JBoss Business Rules Management System, better known as BRMS, and we're going to go over some of the new features that are that's in BRMS 5.3. So 5.3 was released in June of this year. One of the major features that we're going to cover today is BPM. So we integrated our BPM engine into the actual BRMS system. So there's currently 4 open source projects that we've taken and productized in our BRMS. So we have the Drools Governor, which is basically a nice web application that helps do governance around business managing of rules. It's a GWT application. Later on, I'm going to give a demo of it. We have the Drools Expert, which is the actual rules engine itself. So for those not familiar with rules engines, generally, it's the idea of taking the application logic outside, or the business logic outside of the application and externalizing it. And you can do that in a number of different fashions, and we'll see a couple today. We have Drools Fusion, which is like complex events processing, and then jBPM 5. So jBPM 5 is a project that came out of the old Rules Flow and the old jBPM line of project. So what is a business rules management system? So basically, it's the idea of governing and doing version control around all these different rules. It manages the cycles around making changes. It'll do the version control for them. It will allow you to give flexibility to your business users so they can actually write some of these business rules themselves. We're going to see a couple ways that they can do that. So it's enabling the business users, which also then it can be written by the developers as well. So let's see what an example might look like. So in a traditional application, here's an insurance company example. Right, we have something that we're going to process insurance claims with. So basically, the claims come in. There's some things that happen within the insurance or the application, and either the claim is approved or denied. Right. So in this case, it's approved or denied. So one of the problems is with this approach is that the business rules are hidden in applications. So I guess most people here are probably developers. You know, when I would ever get business rules or let's say requirements from my program manager, product manager, I would take those and I would interpret them myself and I would put them in the code and then I would leave the company and then somebody else would try to go and make sense of what I did. It's very hard to find those and understand what's going on with the rules. It takes too long to change them. So, for example, if I wanted to go and make a change in like a Java program, I have to go and recompile the program, probably run it through some regression tests and all this stuff. And it takes a long time in order from the time of that change and to the time it actually makes it to production. And then people interpret rules inconsistently. So I just mentioned that. So, I've made some changes, I made some rules inside the application. It's hard for other people to come in and actually make sense of what I've done. The solution is BRMS. So how does this the solution? One, it separates the business rules from applications. So it's literally taking that application logic and pulling it outside of your application and housing it in a rules repository. Anytime that you make a change, like I mentioned before, it's going to version control it inside the rules repository for you using our tool Governor, which we're going to see. 2, so it's going to express rules in terms that the business can readily understand. So, most business rules do come from the business, and so taking those rules and converting them into code is sometimes challenging. So BRMS is going to give them the ability to actually take some of those, to actually write some of the business rules themselves. So they can do that in a number of ways. We're going to see decision tables in a bit, and then we can also put something called DSL, which is domain-specific language, on top of some of the rules to make it a little more easier and flexible for the business users. And then 3, it empowers the business and IT experts to collaborate. So as a coder, you don't have to worry so much and code as much, giving the flexibility to the business users. And from the business standpoint, they actually feel like they're making an impact because they're helping drive some of this, the business rules. All right, and then support all the rules. You can do that. So from an overview picture, you have your business analysts, they're happy because they're authoring the rules themselves. You still have developers which are still authoring their own rules. Both get merged into this repository, and then you deploy that out, and then your enterprise application can consume those. So the way it works is there's a thing called a knowledge agent that will sit there and scan a set of resources. So for example, I could write rules in something called DRL, which is the Drools rule language, which is just a text-based rule. And that works good for maybe 5 to 10, maybe 50 rules. Once you get above and beyond that, you want to start, it gets kind of hard to manage. So then you want to use Governor, which is our web-based tool for this. And so we're going to see that in a little bit. All right, so next, what is a business process management system? So in 5.3, we introduced this jBPM 5 as part of this BRMS 5.3. And so this is the idea of you have all these different lines of business, right? And you want to coordinate with them. So you basically want to take information and create kind of a model flow. So you might have an order that comes in and it needs to talk to all of these different systems. So in this case, it will help you automate your interactions with your line of business. So it's going to let you actually model your flow on how you're going to interact with all of these different lines of business. And you do that by driving it and creating this model. So Governor, the web-based tool, you can do this modeling. You can also do it in our JBoss Developer Studio, which is a Eclipse-based IDE. 3, you can manage user participation. So this goes back to, let's say, part of your flow, you can't automate it fully because you need some kind of business user interaction. Somebody needs to approve a process, whatever the case is. This is where you could use what we have. It's called Business Central. It's like this little web application that allows you to monitor different tasks that are created. So, for example, if I had an insurance claim and for whatever reason I didn't want to process it, it got flagged as high risk, then maybe it would go to some business analyst that would actually do a manual review and then say approve and then kick that off. So BRMS does support that. And then 4 provides visibility into execution data. So you can turn on different event loggers and this thing called BAM, so Business Activity Monitoring, and take that information and put it into something like BERT that you can actually make sense and read and see into your application. And then some of the benefits, you know, it's efficient, it's less cost, easy to change. So we're going to see later how easy it's going to be in my demo. In theory, fewer errors, and then improve visibility into what you're actually trying to do. Anytime you automate anything, I mean, it's always less error prone, right? If you can get it to work. All right, and the third component of BRMS is complex events processing. So think of this. You have all this different type of information out on the web. So you have email coming in, you have Twitter feeds, you have Facebook, company websites, and this biosphere or blogsphere. And with that, you know, any one of those pieces of information might not really make too much sense to you, but if you're a company and all of a sudden people start talking about your product, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, you probably want to know about that. The one example I can think of is the Toyota brakes, right? That information was on the net way before they were even made aware of it. So if they would have had a way to take in that information and make some kind of meaningful decisions around that, they might have been able to address the problem a little better. So in here, the way this works, CEP works, it works off of these things called events. So as these events come in, we'll talk about the 2 different modes, but as events come in, you can actually make some decisions around that using the business rules. And then in this case, it's going to say, okay, there's a weather delay in London, and then you can actually do something about that, right? So with CEP, it's all managed by our event processor. So there's actually 2 different flavors of this. So you have the cloud mode, which is just basically these events are coming in. You don't really care what order they're in. They're just a bunch of events, and you can write rules around that, make some decisions. Or we have stream mode, which kind of makes more sense for CEP in my mind. This is where you can basically say, you know, you can put a time window around it and say, well, if this, the example we give in our documentation is like if a server, let's say inside of a server room, the temperature for whatever reason in that server room increases by like 10% over the last 10 minutes or like, you know, whatever, you can actually do something about it, right? You can flag that and do all sorts of actions on that. Let's see. All right, so those 3 components are actually 4, right? So you have the rules engine, you have the governance around it, you have the CEP, and the BPM. Those 3 things, or 4 things, are going to make our BRMS 5.3 here. So here at the bottom, you can see all the different pieces. So on the left here, we have the development tools I mentioned before. We have Governor, but we also have the JBoss Developer Studio. And there's plugins for Drools, which is the open source project for this, and jBPM. And using those plugins, it will also tie into the repository. So you have your flexibility. If you're a hardcore developer and you want to do all of your rules development inside of Eclipse, you can do that and still get that benefit of having version control. And then we also have a set of management tools called JBoss Operations Network, and the open source project for that is RHQ. And so you can use that tool to monitor certain things within your rules as they're firing. All right, so this is the big picture. So here, again, it's kind of familiar, right? We have the business analysts, they're happy. You got your developers, they're coding away with the JBoss Developer Studio, which again is just like a superset of Eclipse. You have your operations team, so they're monitoring, making sure everything's working as it should be. All this stuff is getting stored into the repository, and then you have your decision service that's doing all of your events, your business processes, and your rule engines. And then all of your enterprise applications, web services, Java code is now pulling in this information and making, using the business rules. So some of the things that the business analyst might use is this is what a decision table looks like. So you'd use a decision, actually this is perfect for business users because generally the rule is always the same, it's just the data that drives the rule is different. So in this case you can see there's 4 different rules. We have one for bad credit, good credit, very good credit, and excellent credit. And basically, the only thing that's changing here is one, the description, and the min score to max score, and the price discount that comes off of that. We have something called DSL, which is domain-specific language. This is basically comes in 2 parts. So first, you have to have the technical person actually write the rule itself, and then you add the DSL layer on top. So it makes it so you can put basically plain English around it, or whatever language you're writing it in. So in this case, the business user would pick there is a driver, age is less than X years old, and then the business analyst could actually type in the word 19, or the number's 19, and then they can basically input any of this other stuff. So the IT people are still, or the developers are still necessary for this because they kind of set it all up for the business analyst. But once it is set up, then the business analyst can come in and do their thing. Okay, this is what the actual DRL file looks like. So again, this is text-based file. .drl, and in this case I'm importing a couple facts, and then I'm doing some things. So in this case I have a driver fact where the age, if he's less than 25 and he has a number of accidents is greater than 0, or number of tickets is greater than 1, then what we're going to do is we're going to do some actions on that. So it ties into the policy here, and basically it's going to modify the policy and set the price to 700. Okay, so we talked about the BPM. So one of the other things is with jBPM 5, it's standards based. So the modeling here is all done in BPMN 2.0. So if you were using another BPM product that did conform to the standard, you can easily take our stuff and drop it on theirs, or vice versa. All right, so some of the platform features, yes. So the question was, if you define your rules in a decision table, could you still... Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can use both. So what we're going to see is there's 2 flavors of decision tables. You can actually use a spreadsheet, so Excel, or you can do it right. There's a web-based one that I'm actually using. Actually, I'm using both in my example. All right, so from a platform architecture standpoint, we kind of covered most of this, right? You have 2 versions of tools. You got the web-based tools and the Eclipse tools. Both of those tie into the repository. You have your operation monitoring. We talked about this. So Business Central, I did touch on that earlier. This is the web application that allows you to do the human interaction, right? So we kind of give you an example of how it could work. You can use it or you can write your own. And then in the middle here, you got all the stuff that makes the rules runtime work. All right, so we have two versions, so 2 varieties, I should say. We have integrated and standalone. So with standalone, you can basically download BRMS at redhat.com and just basically start it up and it's all there, ready to go. Or if you're already using something like Tomcat or let's say WebLogic, WebSphere, you could use our libraries and just bundle them in with your application and be on your merry way. So from a supported standpoint, we've certified BRMS on our enterprise application platform, which is JBoss, and EWS, which is Enterprise Web Server, and that is our Apache / Tomcat offering. And then it's also supported on Tomcat standalone there. Okay. All right, I mentioned this, right? Choice of tools, just kind of keep that in mind. You got your knowledge. Okay, so what? Yeah, so these are kind of the main big points of BRMS, at least the governor tool, right? So gives your business users and developers the ability to author the tool. You can do the modeling. We talked about that. But what you can't do with DRL that you can do with this is well, unless you're using the plugin, you can do a level of validation. So you can write your rule and then you can click validate and it'll tell you if there's any errors or if it doesn't compile. One of the things that I really love about using governors is test scenarios. So generally if you're using just straight DRL and you want to do unit testing with your code, what you're doing is basically you have a bunch of facts, you spin up a session, you add the facts, and then at the end those facts you check their values, right? See what has changed. But that's more like a complete integration test. There's no good way to test one or two rules. So what test scenarios do inside a governor, and I'll show you what this looks like, is the ability to test down to the individual rule level, right? So as a rule of thumb, what we normally do is like, let's say I had a rule that was like, in that one, like driver was like less than 25, right? So I would have a positive rule test case around that. That would basically test to make sure that that rule would fire if the driver was under 25. And then I'd have a negative one that would basically have a driver fact of, let's say, age 26, and that would basically not make sure that that wouldn't fire, right? So you have both sides of that. We'll check that out on my demo. What else do we have? Deployable packages. So I mentioned this earlier, but we have the knowledge agent that's sitting inside of your code, and that is monitoring, it can be DRL files, it can be hosted package files that Governor is going to host. So really depending on if you're in QA or production, decide on how you want to do the deployable packages. And then I've talked about version management, right? So anytime you make a change to anything inside of Governor, it's going to allow you to type in like a comment on it and then save it and version control it. All right, so the repository, nothing super fancy here. It's JCR 2.0. One of the newer features is you can now access it through REST, so you can kick off things, your unit or your test scenarios and stuff like that. You can also use WebDAV to connect and kind of get a file system view of all your rules and all your packages. Okay, so again, here's some more screenshots of the web-based versus IDE. This is the BPM. Some other highlights, so you can do validation on this. It's going to tell you what's wrong. So this is an example, right, where the process starts. I kick off with some type of Java code here that does time. It's got to go to a user for review. So this is one of the human tasks that we talked about. So they would then kick that off, and then it would go to this gateway, and it would either go to HR approval, or it would go to manager approval, or it would go to a timer, which would then spin until it finished, and then it would go to the next task there. We talked about this, process execution for the most part. All right, and then so as far as rule authoring choices, so we have the decision tables that we talked about, which is going to be the spreadsheet, right? You also have the web-based version of the decision tables. You have the guided editor, which is called BRL, and then you also have DRL, which is the Drools rule language that we talked about. I'll show you that. And then we have rule templates. So this is kind of the same idea as a decision table where you can build out a bunch of different rules using this template. Really the only thing that's changing is the data around that. And then DSL, which is the domain-specific language. All right, so here's an example of a decision table. Again, policy information, so it's calculating information based on different application ages and different performance, stuff like that. We have different versions of this. So we have a multi-hit, all hit, so it's going to go through and basically could hit all of them. All the rules could fire. It could hit the multi-hit first, so it's going to basically hit and execute the first rule that it matches, and then you have the single hit. So it's going to go down and exactly one rule will fire there. All right, so we have the rule templates. So you can use this to basically load in massive amounts of data it could be from like a spreadsheet, for example, or from, I believe, like a data source using this. All right, so from a developer's perspective, right, we have the JBoss Developer Studio. Sorry, a lot of these slides are redundant. The web version, right, Governor. As they get filtered into the repository, then you can use the Governor again to create the test scenarios. We talked about that. And then use Governor to actually build and host the package files that are then going to be ready for deployment. All right, this is kind of what the IDE looks like. So you can actually debug your rules, which is nice. So you can kind of get a look into basically working memory, see what facts are in there. You can, it has global support, so Sometimes you want to embed a service in your rules or something at the global level. You can do that using the globals. Agenda is a way to group rules together, and then execute audit. Basically, you can flip on an auditor, and it'll dump a bunch of information to disk, and then you can use the plugin to actually look at that. So it just loads the data file in there. You can take a look at that. In the middle here, you have it's the RET algorithm. So that's what Drools is based off of. Actually, RET-OO. And so this is the tree that it builds, so if you wanted to see kind of some of the flow. On the left here, I don't know how good you can see that, but you have your DRL and then some of the different views, right? So you have your audit view down at the bottom, your global data that you can watch. You can basically debug it just like you would a normal Java application. All right, here's some more. So your global data, we just covered that. Agenda view, working memory. All right, and then this is a screenshot of Governor. We're going to actually do a live demo of this in a minute. So I'm going to skip a few of these just because we're going to cover them. We have the fact model editor. All right, so web decision table editor. Again, I'm going to cover this in my demo. We'll see what a test scenario looks like, right? So this is testing the individual rule. We talked about the Eclipse to BRMS synchronization. So both Drools and, Eclipse and Governor will persist to the repository. And then I did cover the JBoss operations network, right? So this is some of the things that it can monitor and watch. So number of facts, total firing time, average firing time, total activations, that type of thing. Has anybody seen John or used John before, RHQ at their current company? No? Okay. All right, so now let's do a quick time check. We'll go into the demo. Okay, so basically, when I log into Governor, this is what I'm going to see, right? So it's a nice little search thing here, so I could type things such as a question, which I have a bunch of questions, and you can see it'll pop up and do a nice little AJAX call here and show me all my assets that have the word question in them. As far as the demo goes, what I'm going to do is I've built a little simple application where I can use the rules to dynamically generate questions on the fly for an insurance application. So basically it's a quote or policy calculator where I can type in a bunch of my information, hit calculate, and it'll give me how much my quote would be for the insurance. So one of the things I wanted to do is dynamically be able to add questions to the UI. So it's using rules to actually generate those questions. I take the information from those questions and map them over to my fact model, and then I basically run those through a decision table that will then calculate and price whatever the quote is. So that'll make more sense here in a minute. So this is kind of what let me just start over here. So I have an application of questions. So here I can type in some information, my age, and then I can calculate premium. Now, you can see it's $700, and I have a rule that we're going to check out. If I'm married, I get a discount, right? So it's going to be $100 less. And so, just to be clear, all of these questions are being generated by the rules. There's no business logic in this GUI, in the GUI code whatsoever. It's all externalized to the rules. So let's take a look at BRMS and see. So generally with BRMS, what you're going to do is you're going to break all of your functionality into different packages. So this is an insurance application that I wrote. So I have a top-level package insurance, and then I have questions here. So what I've done is we talked about the domain-specific language, right? So the DSL. And so what I've done is I've created a generic question that my business users then business analysts could go in and actually then create a question. So basically what I've done is, without getting into too much detail, is I'm basically mapping English over to the technical, what's going to be generated in the behind the scenes. So, for example, we'll see what this looks like here in an actual rule. So underneath my business rule assets, I have a list of different questions. And so, for example, we had the age question. I can open that up. So the DSL is this part. So it says question, right? And then the business analyst would type in whatever question they wanted there. And then you could pick from a category and a type. So whether you want that to be a yes, no, a text, or a drop-down. And so one of the features here is, okay, so again, this is from the business user, right? What I can do is I can go to source and I can go to view source, and I can actually see what that is going to look like behind the scenes in actual Drools language. So here you can see that basically if I don't have a question that matches this, it's going to insert a new question into working memory, and then eventually that'll make it to the UI that we saw. Okay. So one of the questions that I have here, which is, which is smoker, right, is disabled. So what I want to show you is I'm going to go ahead and enable it, and we're going to save that. Here's I could type in something, making the change, so enabled. It's my version control. And now I need to rebuild the package, so I can go here, and I can just validate, make sure we're all good, and I'm going to rebuild the package. So basically what that does is that's going to compile all of my rules and put them out on this this URL here called blah 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 / insurance, my package name / binary. And so my code is actually monitoring this, and it's going to pull down any of the updates that happens. So now if I click start over, you see that now I have a new rule here, or a new, question. So are you a smoker? So let's go and see what changes now. So I can do that. I can do 32. I am married. So again, this should be still $600. And now, if I'm going to get dinged if I mark it that I'm a smoker. So now it upped my premium to $660. Okay. So that's the questions. I have this assignment package that basically is going to take the information from those questions and move those over, right, to the actual fact models that I'm going to run through my decision table. So let's go to quote here. So I have a couple different things that I've done. I have an Excel decision table, which I'm not going to demo, but I will show you the web-based one. So here what I have is basically this is what's calculating the rates. So I have a gender, I have a minimum and a maximum field, so if you fall between these ages, and if you're married or not, and state, right? But notice there's no smoker here. So this is kind of calculating the base premium. And so I think, what did I put in? I put in, 32, that I was married, and that premium, if you remember, was $600. So I could change this here if I wanted to modify that if I wanted to. But anyway, business users could come in and easily modify this, right? Now the smoking question, so let's go back to our package for quotes, is I have a specific rule for calculate smoker premium. And if I open this, this is basically I'm saying that an applicant is a smoker. So again, this is DSL. And then I'm going to adjust the premium by adding 10%, right? And we saw that. I can easily say I'm going to change that to 20%, and I'm going to save it and close it. Okay, now I need to rebuild this package. So we're going to build the package. It just takes a few minutes or seconds. Okay, so that's been successfully built. Now my, so this, if I click, should go. As you can see, I just hit calculate premium, and now instead of $660, it went up by 20%. Okay. Let me see what else I wanted to show you. Oh, the test scenarios. Okay, so these are my rules, right? So if I wanted to test some of these, I can go to, let me see, go to quotes, assets. Under test scenarios, it'll list all of my tests. So here is the smoking premium one. So this should now fail, because before what I was testing is a 10%. So basically what this is doing is it's inserting a fact of application, saying that they're a smoker, and that the premium was currently, or at the time, $500, right? And before it would have been an additional 10%, which would be $550. Now when I run this, basically it's failed, right? It says 50% has passed and the other 50 has not. And it even tells me what it was expecting. So it was 600, what came out to be 600, but it was expecting 550. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to 600. And now we can see when I run this that it's going to pass. One of the other nice things about this is in your fact model, if you overwrite the toString, you can actually, when you run the scenario, you can see the events that happen, and you can actually see all the attributes inside of your Java object, which is a nice little feature here. And you can see which rules fired and which rules didn't fire. Sometimes two rules will conflict, and you don't want one of them from a testing standpoint. You don't want to actually test both, or you don't want both of them to run. So you can actually say, I only want these rules to run, or I can prevent other rules from firing as well. So depending on how you want to do that.
Can you run all the scenarios at once?
Yep. So the question is can we run all the scenarios at once? And you can, yes, by package. So let's go to quote here. And here are all of my rules, test scenarios that I have. I'm going to run them all. And so this is saying that all of my tests passed, but only 44% of my rules were covered. It's good to know. I didn't test every, you can see like all these decision tables entries here basically did not, I didn't have coverage around them. But if one of them did fail, I could basically open it here, go and make my changes and do that. Now another thing I can do is if I go back to the package, so let me go back to here, edit. So there's some other URLs, but one of them is for running the test. So when I click this, it basically is going to run all my tests and then send me back this test scenario result. So let me go ahead and open this. And what you'll see is that my test, it'll list whether it was successful or failure, and then it will actually then list which tests they were. It's kind of a nice feature. But I still recommend JUnits as well for more of an integration style overall testing. This is more, in my opinion, for more individual rule testing. All right, can I answer any questions before I wrap up? A couple minutes. Yeah, you have to go and figure out, you write your own tests, just like JUnits. So you want your rules to be mutually exclusive, but let's say you have a lot of rules and there's some kind of flow associated to it. There's a couple different options. You can use the BPM that we showed, the modeling, to group your rules together in sets. You could do that, or you can use agendas. What are called agendas? And group them in agenda groups. So basically, this agenda fires these set of rules, and this fires and keeps going. Yeah, so there's a thing called salience you can set to basically say this rule is going to have priority over this other rule. But generally, you want to write your rules in such a way that they're like I said, mutually exclusive, so they don't fire each other. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Oh, do we? No, there's no. But you would know when you write your test cases, right? You'd see that if you didn't prevent this other rule from firing, it would also fire, and you could see it in that audit log I showed you. Mm-hmm. You can do that. Yep, absolutely. I do have some handouts of BRMS if anybody's interested in those, but if there's no other questions, thank you very much.